Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett. We have finally made it to day one, although technically day number 2 of 49ers OTAs. I want to kindly ask you to like, share, and subscribe to the show because, oh boy, do we have a lot to dive into today, talking about notable absences, who stuck out, who didn't play well at all. Heard from Kyle Shanahan, Brock Purdy, Jair Brown, and Nick Bosa. You're not going to want to turn off this video because we're diving into everything on day one of media access of San Francisco 49ers OTAs. And look, it was a great day. It was the first day essentially back at OTAs at the facility, Levi Stadium, with everybody back. You know, all the cameras are there. All the media comes out for day number 1. And it's just a big kind of, first day back at school feel for the team and the media. Now, let's be honest here. The players have been working out for months and months and months before this. Many of them, most of them, in fact, have been at the facility for weeks prior to day 1 of OTAs. And some players have yet to show up for anything at the offseason program. Today kicked off phase number 3 of the offseason program, which leads into training camp next month. Then the preseason begins, and it should be really, really fun to see how this team comes together over the course of the next 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 months leading into the NFL season. Because look, the aspirations are still Super Bowl. Right? This is still a Super Bowl or bust team, and you can feel that in the air with Brock Purdy, the way he talks, Nick Bosa, the way he talks in his press conferences. This team has not really been, well, I don't want to say shaken. They've been shaken, but they've not been broken just yet. And they want to climb that mountain all the way to the top, and hopefully one day. I'm praying to whoever you pray to, whoever I pray to, just please, let's get a Lombardi trophy. And all that work starts on days like this. So let's talk about who wasn't there putting in the work on days like this. Now, some of these don't really need to be discussed. Fred Warner and George Kittle in street clothes. Fred Warner was more active than Kittle was. Obviously, neither one of them seriously partaking in drills, being vets. Kittle still rehabbing the adductor surgery he had, so you wouldn't expect to see him out there. But Warner was out there. Kittle was out there just watching, observing practice, talking to players. Then it gets to Jacob Cowing, rookie wide receiver out of Arizona. He took part in rookie camp, but we're not exactly sure what happened. But he was in street clothes watching practice today. I would assume minor injury, didn't want to tweak it. Why take a risk? That's an assumption, but I would like to think when you're a young player, you want to prove yourself, you want to be out there, but you're in street clothes, that likely means an injury has happened, whether it be lower body, upper body, we have no idea. But Jacob Cowing did not take part in day 1 of OTAs. There were a handful of players on the side field today doing workouts, either in the gym or on the actual turf field, stretching, running, and jogging. Most notably of that group is Talanoa Hufanga. Nick Sorensen told us, being the media, that Hufanga was back on the field 2 weeks ago, getting himself ready for his rehab with the torn ACL he suffered back in November. He was seen today on the side field doing some stretches, doing a light workout, seemingly as part of his rehab to get back on the field from the torn ACL. Cam Latu was seen in flip-flops, in shorts and a t-shirt. I would assume Cam Latu had already worked out earlier during the day before the media actually got there. So I'm sure he was post-workout talking to people on the sideline, talking to coaches and whatnot. Jake Brendel, who according to Kyle Shanahan has knee tendonitis. He is not expected to partake in any OTAs, and the hope is to get him back in training camp. But that does open a slot, maybe if he can't go for training camp. And if it lingers, maybe a player like Ben Barch, maybe a John Feliciano. And if Feliciano plays center, which he was playing today, playing center today without pads and a helmet on, right? Does that open a spot for Dominic Pooney, rookie out of Kansas, 3rd-round pick to then start a right guard? Not a big deal. I think Brendel, he's a vet, been there for a couple of years now. I just think when you hear tendonitis, usually that doesn't go away, kind of lingers, or it needs a couple weeks to kind of heal over. Then it might come back later in the year. Just something to keep an eye on as the year and the offseason program progresses. Then the big one, Drake Jackson was not on the side field, but was in the weight room getting some stuff done, getting some work done. Now, did we physically see him out there squatting and benching? No, we didn't. But he was in the weight room, coming out of the weight room, talking to players like Hufanga, Latu, and Brendel. So the assumption would be he was in there getting the workout in, or had worked out previously in the day, again, before the media got there, like Cam Latu, and was just hanging around the media. So don't forget, Latu, Jackson, Hufanga, all recovering from off-season or in-season knee injuries and in-season/off-season surgeries. So all three of those guys getting pre-OTA media practice workouts in. Then Greenlaw, obviously, the Achilles is hurt still. You're not going to see him out there doing stuff. Mooney Ward was notably absent. I don't think that's a big deal. He wants to get paid. He knows he's probably not going to get paid this year. If you listen to his guest spot on, I think it's Up and Adams with Kay Adams, he mentioned he wants the bag. He wants to get paid. And to me, that likely, pushes my opinion towards the idea that they have not opened negotiation talks with Mooney Ward, and they might be comfortable at least letting him hit the open market next year, even though they'll try to retain him once next offseason come. But Mooney Ward was not there, which opened up room for guys like Luter and Yadam and Ambry Thomas and other players to be on the field to get reps in the early part of phase 3 in the offseason program. Trent Williams was not there. He's 35, 36. He's an all-pro, future Hall of Famer. Don't come till they have to, Trent. Don't worry about Trent Williams. But then Christian McCaffrey also not there. There wasn't any indication as to it being a big deal. Kyle Shanahan even said, it's not, I'm not too worried about Christian, or his exact words. Malik Collins, the newly signed, or I guess acquired Malik Collins from the Texans this year for a 7th-round pick, he will not come to OTAs until his kids graduate. I think what Shanahan said was next week. So probably not going to see the band all together until training camp or mandatory camp in a few weeks' time. But then there was 2 big absences, and one of them was kind of funny because Jauan Jennings was not at OTAs today. Now, Jauan Jennings posted on his Instagram story months ago that he had gotten the restricted free agent tender contract and seemingly had signed it, but apparently that's not official just yet. Now, I think he'll sign it, but could him not coming today be an indication that they are actually they're having active contract talks? And he said, okay, well, during these talks, I'm not going to show up. Now, again, Jennings can't go anywhere. Jennings is going to be a San Francisco 49er unless he's traded. Now, I think it would be in San Francisco's best interest to not trade their 3rd receiver and not trade arguably one of their most clutch players. They won't do that. He will be here, but could be something to look out for and say, hey, we're all talking about Aiyuk, and we'll get to him in a second. Maybe our eyes should be towards a potential extension with Jauan Jennings, which John Lynch has said he wants to get done. So not a big deal, but something to keep an eye on as the offseason program progresses. And again, Jauan Jennings wasn't even on the printable roster they give out to the media. So I'm sure it was a flub. And when I saw it, I was like, what? Wait, like, what? Where is 15? Where is Jauan Jennings? He wasn't there. I'm sure just a mistake. Or maybe there was something big coming we don't know about. But again, I think he'll be here. Which brings us to Brandon Aiyuk. Now, obviously, he has been the talk of the offseason ever since they lost the Super Bowl. Everyone's eyes shifted towards what's going to transpire with Brandon Aiyuk, star receiver, all pro level player, an ascending star. We have documented plenty of the updates, many of them being bogus, mind you, during the offseason because everyone's talking out of their you-know-what to make something up, to get clicks, just feed the machine. Like, as much as I love Ian Rappaport, like, respect the heck out of Ian and what he does at NFL Network, there was a good week and a half or so where he just said the exact same thing over and over again, but it was reported as something new, in which it wasn't, because there's nothing new to discuss with Brandon Aiyuk. He wants to get paid. He's not going to risk getting hurt without getting paid. That's as simple as can be. Nothing has changed in regards to what they've done with Fred Warner, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa. Now, you may see an earlier timeline for Aiyuk's return than those players, but I don't think there's anything to be worried about. And anyone telling you so, well, I'm going to bluntly say they're wrong. I don't think there's anything to worry about unless Aiyuk just doesn't show up at all, which could happen. But I like to think post-NFL draft, OTAs are here, the team's all together. These two parties are going to want to get something done pre-week 1 against the Jets on Monday Night Football. But because Aiyuk wasn't there, of course, the media has to ask Kyle Shanahan, what do you make of Aiyuk's absence? And his quote was exactly, same as I do about all the guys that aren't here. I wish they were here. You have to respect the business side of things. It's business. Stay out of it as much as possible and look forward to the days when we can just focus on football. Shanahan doing exactly what he said, almost the exact same quote in which it was last year when it was Nick Bosa. He's letting York and John Lynch and Parag handle everything. Shanahan just wants to play football. So I don't expect too many updates out of Shanahan's mouth as the offseason program continues. But they did ask Brock Purdy about Brandon Aiyuk, and Brock Purdy himself, he's going to get paid next offseason. And we'll dive into that a little bit today because Nick Bosa hinted towards that in his post-practice press conference. But Brock Purdy was asked about how important it is to get Aiyuk in that room as soon as possible. And Purdy kind of laughed and said, it's extremely important. He's a playmaker. I love throwing to him. I love BA as a person. So it's definitely important. It's out of my control, but hopefully it gets settled soon. Now, obviously, Purdy's not going into Lynch and Shanahan's office saying, get my star receiver a contract. But this is how you play the game. Now, I don't think Purdy meant anything nefarious. I don't think he was nudging or sending a message. But if you're going to pay me, being Brock Purdy, I'm telling you, I need you to pay my guy BA. Simply because I want him here. He's a playmaker. I love him as a player and a person. They have great chemistry. Now, look, that is not something Lynch and co. don't already know. They know they have to bring back Aiyuk and Brock Purdy. They will do that over time. But this is Brock Purdy kind of just saying to both of those parties, Aiyuk and the Niners, let's get something done because it's important to have Aiyuk in here for my sake, for the team's sake, for Aiyuk's sake. And if all that can come together, you got Deebo and Aiyuk and Jennings and Pearsall and Kittle and McCaffrey and Trent. You're running it all systems go. I think that was Purdy kind of saying, let's get this thing kind of rolling a little bit because, again, there hasn't been much to discuss, and rightfully so, over the course of the past 2 or 3 weeks. Now's the time where you hear, oh, the talks are heating up a little bit. And once you get to mandatory camp, then you will hear BA's been fined. BA's here now. So there's still a little bit of time to go before it gets really serious. But I would not be shocked if, in a week or two, OTAs are over, minicamp has begun, the teams are about to go on break for summer, then reconvene later in July for training camp. That's when things will get really kind of, okay, where's Brandon Aiyuk? Is this contract going to get done? But I think Brock Purdy, not on purpose, but it's very clearly said, let's get my guy Brandon Aiyuk paid. But staking on players that weren't there and shifting to players that were there, because I mentioned his name a handful of times. Nick Bosa was not there the entirety of OTAs, and he showed up for one day last year during mandatory camp. It was the first day. It was a mandatory report day. Came in, showed up, didn't do any drills, talked to the media and said, in a sense, I'll get paid what I deserve. He got paid, had a good year for any edge rusher standpoint. Wasn't a Nick Bosa DPOY year, but still really good year for a player. This year, entirely different. Nick Bosa showed up for day number 1 of OTAs. Now, in a league where stars hold out, in a league where nobody wants to risk injury, in a league where Nick Bosa and Joey Bosa work out in the offseason together, mind you, in Florida. Joey Bosa, new regime in Los Angeles, the Harbaugh and Greg Romans and Navarro Bowmans are out there getting those guys ready. Nick said, okay, I'm going to come to Santa Clara and be with the Niners and my team. And in fact, Kyle Shanahan called Nick Bosa and told him, they had a conversation of like, I want you here. Do you agree it's important to be here? And I'm sure they talked about more things than just that. But Shanahan and Bosa had a kind of a heart-to-heart and said, look, Nick, I need you here. And listed 5 or 6 things, whatever it was. And Nick agreed, like, you're right. I need to be here for the team. Now, Nick did say that some of that was, his body wanting to be in shape, an active recovery for him from a crazy offseason workout he does in Florida with his brother, but also how important it is to be around the guys, build camaraderie, be a leader, kind of point this team in the right direction early on in the offseason program to have them where they want to become week 1, so that hopefully once you go through an entire actual regular season, you are hoisting a Lombardi trophy, in weeks 21 or 22, whatever it is, in the playoffs. So Nick Bosa already in the building, an exact, 3 or 180 from what it was last year. I almost said 360. A 180 from what it was last year, where he was never there at all. Nick Bosa is there today. And Kyle Shanahan talked about having Nick in the building, and he said, I love Nick being around. I'm glad he's here for the first week, and I hope he'll continue to stay. So it does feel like that Shanahan wants that leadership, wants the aura, as the kids say, of Nick Bosa to come in and be a big impact on this team early during OTAs. And even Brock Purdy again was asked about Nick Bosa being there so early in the program. Don't forget, Brock Purdy is somebody who came in a couple years ago, was a rookie, then he tore his UCL and had to be there the entirety of the time to rehab his arm. So he's been there for Nick Bosa's DPOY year in the offseason program. He's been there, during Bosa's holdout. So Purdy has seen the two sides of Bosa. And even Nick Bosa himself talked about, his first year as a rookie, it was bowl games, Senior Bowl, the draft combine, getting ready for that process. Then boom, you're in training camp in a very kind of elongated off season. The next year, it's the COVID year. The next year is kind of the hybrid COVID year and off the torn ACL. Then the next year, it's a contract year. So this is kind of Nick Bosa's first real OTAs to get his body right. And, I'm not one to gush over another man's body, but Nick Bosa's an Adonis, and he still looks like that. The quads have gotten maybe a little smaller, but I would assume he wasn't flexing too hard. He hadn't done leg day just yet. Nick Bosa is still a massive human being. But going back to Brock Purdy, he was asked about Nick Bosa being there on day 1 in the room with the guys, and he said, it's sweet. You can tell it means something to Nick. To show up faithfully practicing, it's pretty special. For us, the other guys in the room, to see Bosa taking it seriously means we all should too. For him to be back in the building, it means a lot. And like I said earlier, Shanahan calling Nick Bosa and saying, look, I want you here for XYZ reasons. Bosa agreeing, that's one of the reasons. When your star player, whether it's baseball, NBA, the NFL, when your star player, your MVP, your defensive player of the year, your offensive player of the year shows up when they don't have to, it goes a long way into instilling not just a culture, but also setting a tone for everybody else. Like a lot of young guys come in, second-year guys come in. Oh, I can take a playoff. No, Nick Bosa's here. If Nick Bosa, of all people, is here, the most proven guy on the team besides Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey and Fred Warner, like if he's here, you need to be here double the time he's there. And it really sets a precedence of, look, Rook, look second-year pro, look whoever else you are, that guy's here. Defensive Player of the Year is here. You need to be here earlier than he is, stay longer than he does, because he's out here when he don't need to be. But that brings us to Nick Bosa talking about Brock Purdy, because it's funny, Nick Bosa is kind of an awkward guy in his press conferences. You know this, I know this. He's kind of mild-mannered, kind of quiet, doesn't want to talk too much, although he did have a pretty funny one today. I forgot who it was, asked Nick Bosa about Brock Purdy, and he was like, oh, he's a man of faith, good guy, and he kind of reminds me of Scotty Scheffler. And we all kind of paused and were like, and if you know Nick Bosa, he got really uncomfortable and said, well, besides that last part. So just Nick being Nick, kind of, we know what Nick means, but it's funny to hear him kind of put his foot in his mouth sometimes when you know what he's trying to say is a good thing, but then it comes out and you're like, oh, Nick, why would you say that, man? Knowing Scheffler just got arrested and got a mugshot and all that stuff. But what Nick was trying to say was Purdy doesn't change and throughout the process. And he even talked about Purdy, being able to maintain who he is despite the stardom he has received and the success he's had over the course of his first 2 years in the NFL. And when he was asked about it, Bosa said he won't change even when he gets paid next year. Now, is that a big statement? No, it's not. But you just know everybody in that room is cognizant Brock Purdy's going to get paid. And I think it just goes to show you that, now, Bosa didn't say a number amount, which why would you do that? But, everyone in that room was like, yeah, Brock Purdy's a guy going to get paid. Now, is that something new? No. But there's still people that constantly disrespect Brock Purdy or don't believe in him. And sure, what does Nick Bosa know? Defensive Player of the Year. This is one of the best defensive players in all football, this, that, and the other. What does he know about quarterbacks? I don't know. Doesn't play the position? Fine. But, come on. Like, Nick Bosa of all people is like, yeah, he's probably going to make as much as I am, probably more than I'm making, which is what it is. But, you can just tell that there's this guarantee Purdy's going to get paid. I just think it's funny I think it means something when a player of Nick Bosa's status just says that when he gets paid about Brock Purdy. Now, we know he'll get paid. You know he'll get paid. We all know Brock Purdy's going to get paid, but just when Nick Bosa says that, carries some more weight. Which brings us to what actually transpired on the field today. Now, look, no pads, no offensive line, no defensive line going head-to-head, really. And when they were, it was super light. You couldn't make a lot of contact. So anyone saying anything about the defensive line and the offensive line, now, sure. Could you look at it and say, okay, well, again, Feliciano's playing center. Is he the penciled-in backup center of the team? Jalen Moore was playing left tackle. He's the incumbent backup. He was playing over Trent Williams, who wasn't there. The starting offensive line was Moore, Banks, Feliciano, Burford, McKivitz. Now, you would assume once Brendel comes back off the tendinitis, Feliciano goes to right guard, Burford slides back down, and when Trent comes back, Jalen Moore moves back down to LT2. But there isn't much to take away from that. The only real observation you can make of the defensive line was that of what Nick Bosa said, that Leonard Floyd is longer and a better athlete than he thought he was. So, again, there isn't much to take away. We didn't see much. You got small glimpses of Jordan Elliott and Javon Hargrave and Yetur Gross-Matos. but there really wasn't much to dive into in regards to defensive line and offensive line. No one's getting beat. No one's beating somebody else. There isn't enough. There's no pads. Nothing can be done in regards to that. Anyone saying, oh, this center and this backup, you're never going to know until pads come on. You're just not going to know. And so it's day one. It's the first day of school. You're just getting your syllabus. That's all it is in each class. You sit there for an hour and they read out the entire syllabus saying, okay, in 3 months, you're going to have this project. In 2 weeks, your first, 5-page paper is due. Are you listening, kids? That's all they're doing on day one. It's super light work again. No pads, rarely any contacts made. And if there is, everyone's like, oh God, is that person okay? So anyone saying, oh, big takeaway, just pipe down. just relax. That said, there were some takeaways in regards to some players that were off the field, on the field, some mixing and matching they've done. Again, the first few days, things are kind of just penciled in as to, potential lineups, potential starters, or just potential replacements for players that are currently injured or just aren't there. That said, the starting outside cornerbacks that I saw were Ambry Thomas and Isaac Yiadom. So that kind of gives you a place or an indication of, okay, Ambry Thomas and Yiadom and Moody Ward are kind of the top 3 outside cornerbacks. Now, Diamador Lenore was there. He started at the nickelback, the slot cornerback position, which again gives you an idea as to where they want to play him during the year and would like to keep him during the year. Jair Brown played a free safety. And George Odom, not Malik Mustafa, played strong safety on day number 1, who was then mixed in with players like Eric Harris and Taylor Hawkins, who has recovered from his torn ACL. We can dive into Malik Mustafa and Jalen Mahoney in a second, but sticking with the first unit, with no Fred Warner or Dre Greenlaw, Devondre Campbell, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, and Curtis Robinson, we're all in there starting at linebacker, with Campbell and DFF being the 2 main starters and Robinson mixing in on certain plays and downs, bringing us to the second unit. And the second unit on the outside was Renardo Green and Rock Ya-Sin. I thought Rock Ya-Sin actually had a pretty good practice today, some ups, some downs, but had a pretty good PBU on Ricky Pearsall towards the left sideline, but then earlier in the practice, got beat by Deebo Samuel over the middle in press coverage. So ups and downs with Rock Ya-Sin, which has been his entire career, but some good things were shown by Ya-Sin as a second tier or backup outside cornerback. Samuel Womack, who got literally 0 reps at nickel last year, was the second or backup nickelback today. I'm sure San Francisco wants to find a place for him, and the easiest place to keep him on the roster is if he can earn that backup nickelback role, which, if any indication of day 1 of practice shows, that's where they want to figure out if he can do. And hopefully, if he can, he'll be a special teamer, but also be the backup nickel once the year begins, with the safeties being Eric Harris and Taylor Hawkins behind the cornerbacks and linebackers. There was kind of a big mixture of linebackers with Curtis Robinson and Ezekiel Turner kind of being the main 3s, but guys like Tatum Bethune, Jalen Graham, and D. Winters all kind of rotated there. But there's kind of a clear-cut discrepancy of, okay, here's the 2s, here's the 3s. We saw a lot more of Graham and Winters playing together. Then you saw a lot more of Robinson, Bethune, and Turner playing together. There wasn't any clear cut who played better, who did this. Again, no pads. Coverages are very kind of just pick your spot. They're playing 2 shell today. So, it's hard to make an assessment of guys this early. I will say this, that Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason split RB1 reps, which makes sense. They're the incumbent backups with no CMC on the field. But Isaac Guerendo was the RB2 on the depth chart, would be RB3, with guys like Cody Schrager and I think it's Patrick Taylor behind them. Schrader didn't do much today. Guerendo was involved in a lot in regards to checkdowns and whatnot. But there really wasn't much to say out of those few players. Mason didn't do much. Mitchell actually looked pretty good as the leader of the pack. Looked quick, looks healthy. Now, call me in 2 days with the legend Mitchell. But for day one, I think it looks like he lost a little bit of weight, which might be a good thing. Now, maybe that's just where I was sitting or standing, but Elijah Mitchell did look faster than usual. Now, once the pads comes on, that can look different, but I do think Mitchell looked better than I've seen him in the past. But again, they weren't running the football. It was all passing again. Or if they were running, very, very, very limited stuff. Guerendo, again, was the RB2/RB3 behind Mason and Mitchell. And that brings me to kind of the more interesting things I observed today. The first one was Malik Mustafa and Jalen Mahoney. Now, Mustafa being a 4th-round pick and Mahoney being a UDFA, they were kind of getting the garbage time reps at safety. I didn't see them. So there were nine periods today. And I think team drills were from period 6 to 9. And they were around 8 to 12 minutes apiece. I don't think Mustafa and Mahoney got on the field until the end of period 9 with like 2 minutes left. Now, they're young. They're rookies. They shouldn't be playing over Odom or Brown. Maybe Hawkins, but when I see players like Harris playing over Mustafa and Mahoney, now maybe they just paired guys up and said, okay, you guys are together. Maybe that's the case. I have no idea what the defensive strategy was today or what the purpose of the practice was, but something to keep an eye on and say, hey, Mustafa was getting garbage time reps on day one. Could that change? Very easily. And that brings me to the offense for a split second because Braden Willis was, from what I saw, the tight end number 2 today over Eric Saubert, over Mason Pline, who I didn't really see much of. Willis was the, I guess, tight end 1 because he would be the tight end 2 if Kittle was there. Was a couple of times he lined up in the wrong direction. Now, his hands were solid. The route running looked fine from what I can tell, but there were a couple of times there was a little bit of communication issues and, lining up in the wrong place. Now, you'd like to think those things be kind of figured out by now, but I don't know what the play call was. I have no idea, what the plan was, but there was a time where they lined up, he motioned to the wrong area. Everyone kind of stopped and was like, what are you doing? And Shanahan was like, reset, do the whole thing over again. And then they changed the entire play. So there's small things like that that'll kind of get you, on the, kind of get Shanahan's eye rolling. And there was a handful of times it wasn't just Braden Willis. I don't want to just call him out because that's not what I'm about. But Ricky Pearsall, year 1, had a handful of plays where, 2 plays where he got called out. And he was like, uh-oh. Now, he wasn't getting screamed at or yelled at, but, Braden Willis, same guy, during a Joshua Dobbs 3rd team rep. Now, with receivers, it's different. Receivers just rotate all over the place. So don't get mixed up in me saying, Ricky Pearsall taking 3rd string reps. Don't. They're all rotating. It's not a big deal. Deebo Samuel took 3rd team reps today. Don't worry about it, right? So, but there was a play where, Deebo, where Pearsall was lined up not on the line of scrimmage where he was supposed to be. And Willis, who messed up himself a handful of times, had to stop, tell him where to go, and kind of taught the rook of like, hey, you need to be here, not there. And, kind of a double-edged sword with Braden Willis. You can be a teacher, but still have a lot to learn. And Pearsall is like, okay, like I'm kind of getting my feet wet, and you like to see a second-year player helping the rookie kind of figure things out. So you can tell that Pearsall is still kind of trying to figure things out. Obviously, on day 1, maybe hasn't had everything, in his brain just yet, but according to Brock Purdy, he has, is in there all the time, putting in work. I didn't see Pearsall make any bad plays. He was the receiver that, again, Rock Ya-Sin knocked the ball out of his hands towards the left sideline. You want his wrists and his hands to be stronger. There also was a play where Shanahan did kind of get in Pearsall, not in his face, but kind of was like, "Come on, Ricky, like seriously." But even then, afterwards, Pearsall made a great play, sliding. The ball was behind him by Purdy, slid on the ground, caught it. You're like, that's what you want to see. Great hands, good ball skills. So there are some downs. He's young, he's learning, but also some really good ups with Ricky Pearsall. I thought Tay Martin looked pretty good. I have in my notes, everyone's talking about Tariq Owens. I'm not someone who believes this team has a lot of space in the receiver room. You have Deebo, Aiyuk, Jennings, Pearsall. You kind of 4 locked down, and you would like to pencil in Jacob Cowling, who didn't practice today. But Tay Martin looked pretty good. Now, what would his role be? Everyone's talking about Tariq Owens, 6'3", big body receiver. Tay Martin, he looked pretty good today. 6'3" guy, a bigger build. He has the explosiveness. And again, there's no pads, but he was featured a lot during OTA's day number 1. See if I can count really fast how many catches he had. I see 1. I see 2, 3, 4. Looks like he had about 5 or 6 catches on the day, which, besides Deebo Samuel, probably led everybody that was a receiver. So good to see I think third-year player in Tay Martin kind of taking a step forward, maybe a second-year player in Tay Martin. I think Isaac Yiadom looked relatively good today. You can tell he's physical. You can tell he likes to get his hands dirty and play that way, which fits what San Francisco likes to do. He had a couple good reps on Deebo Samuel today. And even Deebo Samuel, for as good as he was, obviously, wearing the number 1 for the first time and showing off out there, being a leader of the receiver room. He caught, part of the most balls of anybody out there, if not tied with Tay Martin. And again, clear receiver number 1 on the practice field, as he should be, rocking the Deebo Samuel senior jersey now, mind you, with a number 1. But there was a play where, he's featured heavily, but he did fumble. And now, it's OTAs, there's no pads, whatnot. How seriously are the guys taking it? It's Deebo Samuel. How often does he fumble? Not very much. But on that play, where I believe it was, I don't know who hit it out, but Deebo Samuel was like, "Oh no!" Kind of was like, he had his head down and was like, "Dang it, I messed up." But you can just tell Deebo was having fun. Looks to be in really good shape. Even Kyle Shanahan said that he slimmed down a little bit, which, if you know Deebo, not that he's had a problem with his weight, but he's a wide back for a reason. But it kind of looked like he slimmed down. Maybe he heard "you're not a route runner" and wants to get a little faster. Maybe that's who Deebo wants to become, because he knows in 1 year's time he might be elsewhere. But that's a conversation for a different day. I thought that Demetrius Flannigan-Falls had a pretty good day. Even Nick Sorensen, and let's talk defense for a second. I know we're kind of going all over the place, but Nick Sorensen, what is he going to be like? Who is he going to be like? Nick Bosa said that he brings a little bit of what DeMeco brought to the team. Jair Brown mentioned in his post-practice press conference that he was a leader of men and was a good players coach because he can relate to them, being a former player himself. There was a play where Flannigan-Falls dropped in coverage. I believe he got the PBU, or at least would have if he could make contact with the players. And Nick Sorensen, I'm not kidding, ran out to the practice field and was like fist bumping DFF. Now, was he yelling? No. Was he screaming? No. He was like, "Good job, good job, good job." You can tell that would not have happened last year with Steve Wilks. Nick Sorensen, how much of DeMeco Ryans and solid does he have? He wasn't out there flexing the guns and going crazy, but you can tell there's a little more energy already on display in day number one. And I think it's a good sign. You can tell that players do react to that. And I think seeing the quick affirmation of Sorensen to Flanagan Falls is nice to see. I thought Danny Gray was okay today. Danny Gray is someone who, over his time, which, mind you, Gray, Pearsall, Guerrero, and I think Owens were all fielding punts today at practice. But Danny Gray is somebody who, third round pick, you would like him to make the roster in some capacity. He has speed. He has a skill set that can make it in the NFL. The hands were fine, but there's just times where he'll catch the ball with his hands and try to transfer, and you can tell he almost drops it. Like he isn't the smoothest, catch to runner transitioner, and you can tell it's kind of hard for him. And that wasn't something that happened a lot in college at SMU for him. But for a player that's kind of fighting for a job, I don't know how much Kyle Shanahan looks into that and sees that stuff. Obviously, they have film and they have cameras up in the sky and whatnot. But, just kind of like him and Ronnie Bell didn't have a great day. Were they terrible? No, but Tay Martin and Pearsall and Deebo and, there's some other guys involved, I think had much better days than Gray and Bell. And even Trent Taylor, who wasn't featured really at all, thought a fine day. I thought Gray was okay and Bell was just kind of there, So time will tell both those guys. They're super intriguing to watch because, once training camp begins and once, mini camp begins and once the pads come on, those are going to be guys that are going to be on the fringes of the roster, and you hope one of those guys can make the team. Bell, last year took punt return reps, then fumbled a handful of times. They got benched, and then Gray has been hurt and just kind of has been in the doghouse. So, both those guys need really good OTAs and training camps to kind of pick themselves up. Grendo looked quick. A lot of catches today for him with the second unit. I have 1, 2, 3. Maybe there's more here somewhere in my notes, but had a pretty good day for Grendo. Again, no running. And even Shanahan did say this in his post-game press conference when asked about Grendo. He said he was a running back for those who think he's a fullback. He did say that Grendo really hasn't had a lot of experience doing everything. And if you watched our last video scouting Isaac Grendo, yeah, that's true. He hasn't had a lot of reps, 132 total carries last year. That was his most in 5 years at college. So, Grendo, who I do think can have an impact this year, he just needs time. That's why the Raheem Mostert comps are there. There's injury history, and he's a player that may or may not hit until year 2 or 3. So Grendo's going to need time. But like Shanahan said, the makeup is there. The ability is there. Just kind of got to get his feet wet in the NFL in hopes that he can kind of live up to what his body should make him. Trying to see in my notes if there's anything else. I thought Brock Purdy looked pretty good today. Again, willing to throw the ball deep. Now, he wasn't accurate twice on those throws, but it's day one. But willing to throw it deep. He did throw into double coverage once, and it was like, what are you doing, Brock? But then, on the intermediate stuff, he's precise. He looked like the best quarterback on the field today. Had the most reps of anybody that I can see. I can't count quickly here, but it looks like about 15 to 20 reps, whereas Allen and Dobbs and Mordecai may be combined for that. So Purdy was a clear leader of the pack in regards to reps, which wasn't the case last year. He wasn't even practicing at this time last year. Or if he was, it was super limited in what he can do. But, he was precise, over the middle, towards the outside, near the sideline. But he had a really good play today where, as you know, Brock Purdy loves to scramble. The play breaks down. He spins. He runs to his left, kind of sets up, and he finds Trent Taylor probably for a touchdown about, he probably hit him for about 20 about 25 yards downfield over the linebacker who jumps and couldn't get to it. Taylor catches it and runs to the pylon, which probably would have been a touchdown in the end of in an actual game, but it's probably a 50 or 55-yard touchdown pass. That would have been 20, 30 yards a yak. But a really good play by Purdy there. Again, no pads, this, that, and the other. You already know how limited they are, what they can do when it comes to actually tackling each other. But Purdy probably the play of the day on offense for both teams. Outside of Pearsall's sliding catch that I thought was really good. And sticking on Pearsall for a second, I think of the rookies so far, which he should, I think he's looked the best. And we're not going to be able to tell with Green and Mustafa and others, Bethune, until the pads come on. But, for as limited as they are in contact, Pearsall, the route running is really good. And that's his go-to. That is, who he is. The ball skills are there. He looks very poised, whether he's playing against Amber Thomas or Yadam or Green or whatnot. He looks like he can beat the best this roster has to offer outside of Mooney Ward and I think Lenore, who he didn't line up against today. And if he did, I didn't see the Lenore rep, but he was open a lot. So, I think the Ricky Pearsall people that think he's a bust, which weirdly enough, there are already those that are calling him a bust, which is just idiotic. He's looked pretty good. Now it's been a few days, no pads, but still, the positives outweigh the negatives when it comes to Ricky Pearsall so far. I think if you were there, you would have been pretty impressed with him in the handful of days I've been there. But let's stick to their second round pick, because this is where I want to end the show. Renardo Green, I thought, had an amazing play. Now, was it groundbreaking? No. But for a young player, guarding Deebo Samuel of all people, if you want to make your bread in OTAs and training camp, you guard the best this team has to offer. Whether you're Lenore against Pearsall or Lenore against Aiyuk. Take last year, for example. Lenore really kind of, he had a great year 2 years ago, but last year in OTAs and training camp, he was there. And the battles him and Aiyuk had were just it was teaching tape for Lenore and Aiyuk, right? But Renardo Green lining up against Deebo Samuel, you can get scared, your knees can start to shake, you can get nervous. He didn't blink, which was great to see. The moment was not too big for the first time lining up across Deebo Samuel for the media saw. And it was a crosser over the middle. I thought he played it great. Deebo reaches for the ball. Green smacks it down, gets the PBU, and is like, nope, locks him down. Then all of a sudden, you get the whistle. Flag, and you're like, you got he was like, seriously? He's talking to the ref, and he's like, what did I do? This, that, and the other. But on that play, which I didn't think was a DPI, now, the ref called it. I'm not a ref, is what it is. But with the pads on, helmets on, could that call have been made differently? I think so, but it's not like Green wasn't heavily penalized in college, so we'll leave that there. Thought it was a good play, good coverage. Could have not been a penalty, but was one. But it was when Green came off the field, I thought we learned the most of anything in practice. That wasn't exactly, on the field related. When Green came off the field towards the sideline, who was there coaching him? It's Brandon Staley. And we have no idea exactly what Brandon Staley's role is. We're supposed to find out on Wednesday morning when the media meets with the coaching staff and they get the official announcement for the first time. All his name says is assistant head coach / defense. We don't know what that role is. And Nick Sorensen did say in his press conference during rookie camp that he had been working more closely with the nickel backs and the defensive backs. Well, he was coaching defensive backs today. and you saw Green walk over to the sideline, and who's there with him? It's Brandon Staley, talking to him, kind of talking him through things, pointing things out to him. I'm sure they're talking about the coverage, his hand placement, and where his hips were, all those things that coaches do. But I do think the one remaining question in regards to grander scheme of things is, where will Nick Sorensen be on game day? Where will Staley be? Sorensen was next to Kyle Shanahan with the rest of the roster. The linemen, the running backs, the quarterbacks, the receivers, the linebackers, right? Staley was on the sideline with the defensive backs. Now, to me, that tells me whether Staley is on the sideline or in the booth, he's not going to be very close to Nick Sorensen, or at least in regards to their coaching specialties or their coaching delegations. Sorensen will be linebackers, defensive line, overall kind of seeing everything, with Chris Kocurek on the defensive line as their coach. And Staley will be kind of taking over the defensive backs. And I think it makes sense. Staley with the Chargers was infatuated with using Jauan Jennings in different roles, and they just didn't have the personnel, which is in part Staley's fault, but he doesn't have to now make those decisions. But I think seeing him coach a young player like Green on the sideline, standing next to guys like George Odom, other veteran defensive backs in that room, I think it was very clear where Staley's role will be. I would not be surprised if it says assistant head coach and, defensive back coach or something along those lines. Or, he may have a generic title like, defense / assistant head coach, but you'll be working with the defensive backs in a kind of non-stated role, which has already been what Sorensen has said. So, I thought it was a good play by Green, but overall kind of gave us a better example as to, what Brandon Staley's role will be, because I know many of you out there don't even want him here, don't even like him, but, he was the first person I saw walking out of the facility today before practice began to meet the team. And what I mean by that is they were already out there. He was coming out, and I was like, oh, there's Brandon Staley, red hat on, and he immediately walked to go coach the defensive back. So just an indication as to what his role might actually be with the team, which aligns with what Nick Sorensen had said earlier during rookie camp. Okay, that was day one of OTAs. It was a lot. It was jumbled. It was mixed up. I got a sunburn, as you can see, but it was all worth it. Now, I don't believe there's any more practices during the week. There might be some during the weekday, and time will tell how those things look and what the team looks like. But I want to kindly ask you to don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you like the content, leave a like and subscribe on YouTube. I want to reach 1,000 subscribers, hopefully prior to my wedding date on May 31st. 10 days, 9 days. Can we reach 1,000 subscribers? Consistent and constant Niner content coming your way throughout the entire offseason program, leading into the year, and carrying you throughout the entire 2024 and hopeful 2025 part of the Niners season. If you could also follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. You can use our promo code 49ersaccess at SeatGeek.com to save yourself $20 off. That schedule is out. If you want to buy tickets to NBA playoff games, MLB games, or you want to get ahead and get some NFL tickets to watch your Niners play, use that promo code and save yourself $20 off at SeatGeek.com. That's all I got for you today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Day one of Niners OTAs. It was really fun. Can't wait to see what happens with the team as the offseason progresses. And for all of the updates, all of the content, come right back here. And until next time, my name is Sterling Bennett, and stay faithful.